I get asked a lot about herniated discs. There are a lot of people in the world who are going to have way more information for you on an anatomical and physiological level than me, but I want to address herniated discs from the perspective of the way I was taught to do yoga, which is fairly unique on the method of Vanda Scaravelli and Esther Myers. In fact, this style of yoga is really, really good for herniated discs and low back health in general. There's a terrible story going around that yoga is bad for your back. Well, it really depends on what you're doing and how you're doing it. So think about a wire. If you took a wire and you bent it back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, you're going to weaken it, right? So if you do downward dog, downward dog, and burpees and back and forth, well, yeah, that's going to be hard on a weak back. And I know you can build your core strength doing that, but are you doing it quickly? And if you're doing it quickly, are you able to really hold the belly in the way you need to? Or is your back bearing the brunt of that jump back into plank, for example, where your low back does a shock? There are a lot of people that will speak to you about herniated discs from like a chiropractic level, which is so valuable, but I just want to address it from a yoga perspective. Picture that you have your vertebrae. So there are these bones stacked up. And between each of your vertebrae, there's a jelly donut. And say you're really, really stressed, or you do work like a carpenter where you're constantly having to lift and not necessarily in the best way for your back. The muscles of your back and your hip flexors, which are deep in the abdomen, might become so tight that they are acting like a vice grip on those vertebrae, squeezing them together, pushing the jelly out of the donut. The other thing is a lot of people will herniate a disc when they do something really dumb, like maybe they sneeze, or the big one is twist and lift. It's putting your low back in a fairly vulnerable position. But generally what happens is it's this little thing you do and suddenly you have massive pain down your legs or in your back, and some people are actually immobilized by it. The good news is that your body is super smart and it will find ways around this herniation. For example, the vertebrae themselves will start to fuse together. The problem is it takes a while for that to happen, and above and below run the risk of herniation if you don't deal with why that disc herniated in the first place. So of course, I'm talking about this all from the perspective of not having a severe impact in that area, right? This is all about long term, and it's this one moment that's like, what? I've done that 1,000 times. Why did that hurt my back? Well, it was cumulative, right? It happened over time, but maybe you didn't hear the warning signs, which is really normal. So when we're dealing with a herniated disc or a bulging disc or degenerative disc disease, it would make sense that we want to stop squishing the jelly out of the donut, right? Let me just talk about degenerative and bulging first. Because herniation is the jelly actually pushing into the nerves, and that's what's causing such a dire amount of pain. But if we just deal first with degenerative discs or bulging, then we know we want to make space between those vertebrae. We want to stop shrinking. So how do we do that? We breathe. Believe it or not, the answer to this is primarily found in your breath. So try this out with me. Put one hand over your belly. Let's just do that for now. Maybe both hands. Just be fancy. Inhale and feel your hands expanding forward on your belly. When you exhale, the belly draws slowly in toward the back. So when that happens, your tailbone drops a little bit down. And as the tailbone drops a little bit down, the rest of your spine springs up. Think about the way a tree, or any plant life for that matter, grows its roots down into the earth first. From that downward growth, it ascends. But if it focused only on ascension, it would uproot itself, right? So you must first grow down. Your soil line is at the very top of your sacrum. Your sacrum is where your thong triangle sits, part of your spine, so just below where the thong triangle sits. Sacrum is also triangular. So just above that is where we want to think about down and springing up. Now with the herniated disc, the jelly has been pushed in one direction. Well, there's an option of 4 directions: forward, back, side, side. I always have to think about this. The most common is for the jelly to be pushed back. So if it's being pushed back, my vertebrae, if the jelly, so this is my back and this is my front, the jelly is being pushed back because I've done too much forward flexion. So my back has rounded through my lumbar spine, which has pushed the jelly out too many times. So what I want to do is I want to get the front of my spine, right in the abdomen, to start to lift again, open. I want to pull that lumbar spine back into the body. I said lumbar spine because I forgot the most important thing. Most people herniate L4, L5, and L5S1. So that's the bottom of your lumbar spine, the juncture towards your sacrum. For the most part, it's that the lumbar curve, which curves into the body, has been compromised and pushed out. So we want to increase that lumbar curve. Now, every once in a while, there will be someone for whom it's the opposite. Back bending is not what they want to do. They need to forward bend to get that jelly back, but it's just so much less common. Because think about how we sit. We sit in crappy chairs, we sit in our cars, sort of slumping, right? Or we stand slumping. Feel what happens in your lumbar spine when you do that. So I'm going to do a series of videos with different movement possibilities for you without this super long instruction beforehand, because I want you to be able to just tap into those videos, do these exercises, and when you want this kind of information, you can tap into this one. But before I end this particular video, I want you to get the breathing practice. And I'll do another video with only the breathing practice put into motion. However, just for this moment, picture yourself as Spider-Man or Spider-Woman. And I want you to stand inside of your belly in front of your sacrum. So imagine your back is flush against your sacrum. So from there, so I can't get my hand low enough, but you know where your sacrum is. From there, you're going to send a spidey web to the back of your navel. So now as you inhale, I want you to feel that spidey web elongate. So push the belly out. That happens because your diaphragm is pushing down as you inhale. It's totally normal. You've just forgotten how to breathe this way. It's just a matter of remembering. So you push the spidey web out. Now as you exhale, you start to draw that spidey web in slowly. So you're not being punched from the outside, but it's this slow drawing in of navel towards spine. Second spidey web. Send it to the back of your solar plexus. That's where your ribs come apart. So you send 2 spidey webs out now, one to the navel, one to the solar plexus. You're going to pull them in slowly, 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 not generating any kind of a rounded back, simply pulling those muscles and that tissue in toward the sacrum. The ribs start to squeeze in and down. The navel draws in, right? Do you feel that? So there's a third one. Now this is the hardest one to understand, but it's a really key one. Imagine that you can send a spidey web right down to the muscles of your pelvic floor. So now as you exhale, you're going to pull the muscle, only the muscle of the pelvic floor up. Now I'm going to say 2 words that you might not hear every day said on YouTube. As you're pulling the muscles up, it's like you're pulling the walls of the vagina up or your testicles up into your body. Someone said to me once, imagine that you're in a bathtub and you're going to pull the water up from the bathtub. Maybe that works for you. Inhale, expand. Feel downward pressure in the pelvic floor as well. Exhale, pull those 3 spidey webs in. So it's not really Kegels. Yes, there's a similarity, but do you notice how as you're inhaling and you're exhaling, there is expansion and contraction? Because you don't want just contraction against those already contracted muscles. You want to expand and contract. So try that out. I'm going to do a couple more videos. I'll link them in the description of this one. Do not feel alone, lost, or hopeless with a herniated disc. I promise you, you will get mobile again if you treat yourself right.